Hello, I'm Rick Stieber. Have you ever been wandering in the outdoors and stopped to contemplate how the forest got here? Most of us assume they simply grew naturally, but actually our modern forest began with an idea about conservation, an idea developed by early day foresters and timberland owners. For hundreds of years, wood from trees has supplied our basic needs. To maintain our way of life into the 21st century, wood and wood products will remain vitally important to us. If it had not been for some forward-thinking people in the past, we would not have nearly the amount of forest land that we enjoy today. Let's take a look at some of the people and events that took place and changed the face of America. We begin by hearing from Jim Peterson of the Evergreen Foundation, writer-publisher for many years now of the Evergreen magazine.
Well, the West has been the scene of horrific wildfires. Most people don't realize this, but we've had many wildfires in the West, 1,000,000 acres and more. The 1910 fire, for example, which burned across northern Idaho and western Montana and is thought to have been the largest wildfire in history. It's the largest one for which we have evidence at any rate. 3 million acres in 2 days and 2 nights. The fire so enraged the public that they demanded that Congress put the U.S. Forest Service in the firefighting business. Congress reluctantly did it. Money was scarce then. They really didn't want to spend the money, but it was hard for them to argue against the enormous resource that had been lost in those 48 hours. So Congress put the Forest Service in the firefighting business. With that came the formation of what were called fire cooperatives. The U.S. Forest Service was involved, early state forestry operations were involved, counties were involved, and private landowners were involved. The cooperatives were created to deal with fire. You have to imagine that when the 1910 fire blew up in northern Idaho, there was no road system. We literally had no way of dealing with that fire. Part of that effort was to build roads, because minus road access, there was no way you could even get to a fire.
More successful efforts to control wildfires really had to be made before anyone would be interested in replanting land or investing in future timberlands.
Anyway, it wasn't until we really got our arms around fire, developed the road system and the firefighting tools that we needed, it wasn't until those events converged that it really made sense to anyone to begin to replant land in the aftermath of timber harvesting. Why replant if you knew the chances were good that your investment might well go up in flames in a few years?
Prior to this time, it was common practice to harvest the trees and then let the land go back to the government for back taxes. Holding the land for 60 or 90 years until the next crop of trees became ready to harvest was not economically feasible for most companies. And the road system needed to be extended. In the early days of Western logging, railroad and steam donkey engines were used, but they were limited by the steep, rugged terrain.
I remember when at Nia Bay in 1939, the bulldozer wasn't commonly used. We had primarily drag line shovels and pile drivers to build a railroad grade over swampy land or over creeks and so on. It was the bulldozer that came in that changed the circumstance for managing land in its entirety.
Clarence's first job out of college was with the Forest Service in 1935, doing time and motion studies involving new equipment, including bulldozers.
Well, it gave you access, which we didn't have before. When you build a railroad grade, you're limited by the elevations of that you find, and beyond a certain point, you've reached the end. Now,
And then things began to happen.
But once wildfire was controlled, once we had done, as Bill Greeley said, run smoke out of the woods, it began to make a great deal of sense to make investments, proper investments, in reforestation, in planting after harvest, in planting after wildfires. And once we began to replant land, not only did the trees have greater value, but so did the land itself. That's conservation.
And about this time, an idea began to develop, an idea that was born out of the timber industry, an idea that has revolutionized American forests ever since. Clarence Richin was working with Crown Zellerback in Neah Bay, Washington, and was given the assignment to evaluate cut-over timberland and determine if they were worth keeping. I'm going to read Clarence's actual account in his own words. In 1939, the operations manager asked me to survey and look at their cut-over lands, some 15,000 acres. He wanted to know, are the trees coming back? Should planting take place? Could lands be fireproofed? Should lands be held for future growth? Good questions, and he asked me to answer them. It didn't take long in my survey of cut-over lands to discover a wealth of young trees, some head high and some seedlings in recently harvested areas, often 1,000 trees to the acre. In reforestation practices today, typically half that number is planted. Clarence continues, I answered one question which wasn't asked. Could the company property and the Macaw Indian land adjoining be sustained as perpetual productive forest? My answer was yes, absolutely and affirmative. That was in 1939. This was a question that was being asked by many forest landowners, large and small at that time.
I worked for Weyerhaeuser Company in the summer of 1940, or 1941, when Clyde Martin was their chief forester, and he really was the father of the idea of putting properties together in manageable units and placing the foresters on the property, making sure that the property was adequately protected, and integrate forestry knowledge with logging knowledge. And that was the idea behind the Clemens tree farm, and the first tree farm that was certified.
An idea was born, an idea of establishing tree farms, and it was an idea that spread very rapidly. One of the people present at the dedication of the Weyerhaeuser Clemens Tree Farm was a young man by the name of Bill Hagenstein, who also took the minutes and was present at the signing of that document.
Just a coincidence, but 6 days after I went to work as forester for the West Coast Lumbermen's Association in Seattle, Weyerhaeuser dedicated the Clemens Tree Farm in Montesano, Washington. And the West Coast Lumbermen's Association, jointly with the Pacific Northwest Loggers Association, had a forest conservation committee which employed the foresters, of which I was one. Our committee, made up of members of our two associations, lumbermen, some of whom were foresters, decided that the idea of tree farm was such a good one that we ought to start a program. And then we started in December to sign up people. We developed an application form and set the rules for the game, stability of land ownership, keep the land, dedicate it to the growing of timber, give it adequate protection against fire, insects, disease, and don't allow excessive grazing on it if it's an area where cows are in the woods or other domestic animals.
They also stipulated that if the property was certified, it gave the committee the opportunity to look over the property and make sure the owner was living up to the rules of the game.
And that's the basis of the program. And then on January 20, 1942, we certified the first tree farms in America. And we did that about 3/8 of a mile where you and I are sitting right now. And of course it began to grow. It grew. It was an idea to accomplish really two main things. One was to keep the privilege of private forest land ownership in the United States by demonstrating to the people that we could manage these lands through protecting them adequately, keeping them productive through reforestation, through better utilization of the timber, all these things. As we went along, we kept improving the program, making it a little bit tougher to get into. The second thing was, we knew from the history of forest fires in this region that we needed to improve the protection. You know, a lot of this land had been logged, a lot of it had reproduced naturally, but we didn't have protection to sustain it. It kept being destroyed. So the tree farm program was a vehicle through which we could encourage people to do a better job of protection.
As Bill said, this was an idea that grew. In 1942, there were 411 tree farms around the country. By 1951, there were 3,500. By 1961, there were 22,000. And today, there's over 67,000 tree farms in America, in no small part as a result of Bill's efforts. Along with the idea of tree farms, the need to develop nurseries was also apparent to support reforestation. Efforts had been made as early as 1908 to reforest with seedlings grown in nurseries.
The first big impetus for artificial reforestation on private land came when we started our nursery at Nisqually. After the tree farm program was being discussed, at the same time in the summer of 1941, our forestry committee decided that we'd establish a nursery.
That began a program that has also grown with the tree farm program. With the tremendous overall success of the tree farm program, now only 60 years old, we asked Jim Peterson who he thought had made the most significant contributions to getting this program going.
Bill's contributions, Bill Hagenstein's contributions to forestry are enormous. In fact, I can't think of anyone who in his life has given more of himself or made a greater contribution to the industry. Bill commanded such presence and respect that he spoke for the entire industry. He was frequently called upon to testify before Congress. I also have a lot of his testimony. He counted among his personal friends men like Everett McKinley Dirksen, Hubert Humphrey, Sam Ervin, congressmen and senators of enormous stature had great respect for Bill because they knew that he spoke for the industry and they knew that he was a man of great principle. Well, Bill's great contribution to the tree farm system, I think, falls into two areas. One, he became an impassioned supporter, if you will, of early legislation that created not only the tree farm system, but also legislation that promoted the science of forestry, if you will. His other great contribution, I think, is in simply speaking out, time and time again. You go through his speeches, the message doesn't change. For 50 years, the message didn't change. Bill talked about the need to manage forests, the need to plant trees, the need to care for forests. That's conservation. That's conservation.
The importance of the tree farm system has been paramount in the maintenance and sustainability of our forests nationwide.
I hesitate to think where we would be in this country today had it not been for the formation of the tree farm system, for the recognition of the fact that it was important to manage private forest lands as best as possible. That system has played an enormous role in the fact that today these privately owned forests provide the lion's share of the wood fiber that's harvested in this country. That's the contribution of the tree farm system.
There have been many others who have helped play a role in tree farming and providing us with our wood products that we need. One of those has been Ralph Hull. Besides being a tree farmer, Ralph built and operates a sawmill in Dawson, Oregon. Ralph began sawmilling in 1934 by leasing a shut-down mill. In 1939, he built a mill on his uncle's sawmill site, which had burned down the year before. The Hull Oaks Mill is still running and remains one of the last steam-powered, fully operational mills in the country today. As tree farms grew, so did the markets for the many and diverse products that Americans needed, and sawmills close to the source of timber were the most economical. The Hull Oaks Lumber Company provides high-quality lumber and specializes in cutting long lengths, up to 110 feet, and large timbers. They can still handle up to 9-foot diameter logs as well as dimensions down to 14-inch tops. Ralph's grandson, Todd Nystrom, now runs the mill and the company along with Ralph. Most of their logs come from tree farmers throughout the Willamette Valley and the western coast of Oregon. It is truly an experience to take a tour of their mill and see how sawmilling was done during the 30s and still is operating today both profitably and competitively with 65-year-old equipment. Ralph had taken the advice of T.J. Starker, also a legend in tree farming, many years ago when Hull Oaks began acquiring timberland. T.J. would tell his forestry students at then Oregon State College to buy cut-over timberland and replant them for future growth. As Ralph said, it was some of the best advice he could give his students. And Ralph Hull followed that same advice, now growing over 6,000 acres of forests and replanting over 100,000 seedlings every year. Like every other forest land owner in Oregon, sustainable forestry is not only practiced, it's the law, and a good one. Tree farmers helped write the law, and the tree farm system promotes sustainable forestry throughout the country. Many thousands of others have made tremendous contributions to our forests. One particular individual is Bob Maley. Bob's family pioneered in Oregon in the Albany area about 1853. Bob grew up in the Sweet Home, Cascadia area.
I went to school in the Foster and the Sweet Home area, and went to college at Willamette University and also Oregon State University, where I graduated in forestry in 1936. I think I was born to be a forester.
Bob then went to work for the Forest Service in the Mount Baker Forest, and shortly thereafter became a district ranger on the Willamette National Forest, and eventually, after a 10-year departure from the Forest Service, finished his career in 1974 as an assistant supervisor on the Siuslaw National Forest. However, Bob is probably best known for his work as a tree farmer and with the Willamette Valley Ponderosa pine.
The Willamette Valley Ponderosa pine, as far as any scientist could detect, is identical to the Eastern Oregon Ponderosa pine or the Klamath Falls Ponderosa pine, but it isn't the same. Genetically, over the millennia, it has adjusted to the soils and the climate of the Willamette Valley until for all practical purposes, it's become a separate species.
Bob spent almost 15 years convincing people of the importance of this unique species. It is now being grown commercially in nurseries, and recently a nursery was named in Bob's honor.
And I guess it was earlier in the month of August, that so-called seed orchard was dedicated and named the Robert H. Maley Orchard. I guess I feel all puffed up about that. But
the tree farm system today not only provides certification and helps people with all facets of forestry, but annually it recognizes people who have done an exemplary job of managing their tree farm and selects state, regional, and national winners for this prestigious award.
In 1989, as a county a tree farmer, I became a candidate for the in the tree farmer of the year competition, and was chosen subsequently as a state winner, and went on to become a Western regional winner.
Other important contribution that the tree farmers are making on the landscape involve their individual choices of how and what methods to use in managing their lands.
The natural management development of their properties was based really primarily on selection, thinning, taking individual trees that had a market, removing them and letting the others grow. And many landowners over time discovered how fast the trees grow that were left behind. Tremendous opportunity to manage these forests differently. We'll do less clear cutting, we'll do more thinning. And there's economic reasons for doing it. It's not only taking what you can market, but it's also leaving what you believe is best for future growth. We're in a very exciting period of forestry that has evolved over time, but
along with changing market conditions and changing environmental concerns on the landscape, timber growing and harvesting techniques require adaptation, utilizing equipment that was better suited to meet today's lighter on the landscape approaches to forestry.
Today we've got logging technologies coming out of the Scandinavian countries that change the whole outlook of our program of partial cutting of trees. And that includes the log processor, the feller buncher, the log forwarders. The machine itself severs the tree, it limbs the tree, it cuts it into log lengths, and it sets it aside for another machine to come and take it away to the roadside. And that technology is changing the nature of forestry everywhere. And
other equipment has been developed by tree farmers for tree farmers, such as the equipment shown here developed by Mark Havel, also an Oregon tree farmer. Mark's equipment enables tree farmers to manage individual trees with little or no disturbance to the neighboring trees. Timber management and tree farming to these people has been a commitment to the land, its people, and the environment for the long term.
What is happening to some of these tree farmers is the fact that they suddenly realize, oh, they've got a huge value out here. Their forest is appreciated in value. And many of the older generation people saying, look, on my demise, what's going to happen to my forest? So he's saying, well, I want to be sure that this forest continues. I want to be sure my family understands this, and I want to prepare my family to manage this forest for the long term. And that's happening over and over again.
Well, it's here for us. All of these benefits are here for us, but it isn't free. We've got to put ourselves into it. I mean, put our heart and soul into it, and it's not somebody else's problem. It's my problem. It's your problem. It's her problem. It's all of our problem. It's all of our benefits too. But we have to understand we have to understand. As owners, we have to understand the science that's involved in it, and we have to understand the social aspects, and we have to understand the welfare of all the creatures that contend with it. It takes some constant thinking, some constant planning, and as I said, a lot of stubbornness and determination and patience.
The importance of tree farming is that you're managing a renewable resource. through the practice of forestry. And to the consumers of the world, there's nothing more important than that. There's no civilization on earth that has ever survived without wood. And because the good Lord gave us such a wonderful renewable resource, tree farming is helping us renew it and is going to keep it in the inventory of things that are needed for our civilization. Without it, we're jinxed. We can't afford to mortgage our future by not practicing forestry in the United States. Amen.
These are some of the people that are responsible for the forest you see around you today. These are the people of vision and determination, people who have made a better future for all of us. Without the tree farm system, our forest might not be here at all, or they could be a lot smaller in the total number of acres. Surprised? I thought you might be. Well, for now, I'm Rick Stieber, hoping to see you again when we'll have the opportunity to meet some of the other pioneers in the Oregon tree farm system.